Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex podcast. I'm your host, of course, Alex. Today we have two very special guests. Today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, talk about themselves for a quick second, and then we're going to jump into the topics.
Awesome. I'll jump in. Hi, I am Angela Lauria, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Autistic Culture podcast. I am also an author and an editor and a ghostwriter and a publisher. Matt?
I am Matt Lowry. I am the other co-host of the Autistic Culture podcast. I am a licensed psychological practitioner in Kentucky. I am autistic. My son is autistic. I only see autistic people. I do autism evaluations, and I talk nonstop about autism all the time.
Wait, but I do like the idea that you only see autistic people. Holistic people are just invisible. It's got some M. Night Shyamalan vibes to it.
Very much so. Yeah. The holistic, the autistic sense.
I see autistic people everywhere.
Well, we were just watching the Muppet movie, and I was pointing out all the autistic people that came on screen, including Frank Oz, Jim Henson, and Steve Martin. So, because this is the way.
Because you only see autistic people.
Exactly.
Right. That's right. So, once again, I want to welcome you guys. I appreciate you for having the time to come on today to answer a few questions and to let people in on the autistic world per se. So Angela, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the mission and vision behind Difference Press?
Yeah, I mean, I will. My publishing company, I've been in publishing since I was 20 years old. I wrote my first book when I was 7. It is my deepest and longest, most passionate special interest is writing books. I paid my way through college by writing other people's term papers for $10 a page. Very proud of that. And so I have been very successful helping other people write their books. And that's what I did for a long time. In the last few years, where I've shifted more to autism advocacy and working with autistic people, my mission now and where Difference Press has gone over the last few years is helping neurodivergent autistic people, particularly, get books done on their special interests. That maybe because of process complexity or just having so much information, it's been hard to get those books done. I want to get them out in the world because there are people with a lot less knowledge writing books on these topics just because they can handle the process complexity of writing and publishing a book. Okay. Matt's like, what she said.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say. You said she summed it all up there.
yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, there are a lot of things that involve a lot of details and a lot of really tedious, repetitive stuff, and there's because of that it prevents a lot of autistic people from doing stuff. Whereas, there's a lot of people who are rabid self-promoters that will go out and say, I know everything about everything, and I can, just rattle off all kinds of stuff, and they get published and they have 45 books and Dr. Oz. So, they don't know anything about anything, but yet they are very, very well sold and make lots of money. But if you do have a lot of personal experience and a very specific area of expertise, you might need help in getting that all together. And Angela's helping me write my book now, so I'm there. I get it. It's important work.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely would agree. So Matt, could you tell us a bit about your background and how you became involved in the field of psychological evaluation?
Okay, so my story is long and weird. So when I was a kid, it starts off in first grade. They knew that I was weird and different, and they tried to test me, and I freaked out and ran out of the school because I didn't want to be locked in, because I was afraid they were going to lock the school and I would be trapped there forever with the janitor and maybe become a janitor myself because I couldn't leave. I don't know. But anyway, they tested me again in third grade when I was calmer and older and wiser, and they put me in a gifted class. But they also signed me up to be followed around by a psychologist. And I didn't have therapy or anything. I went to this psychologist's place and did like tests. And I would watch 3-2-1 Contact while building Legos, while talking about Planet of the Apes and all this other stuff. And I just thought, hey, it's cool that I've got a job now, because at the ripe old age of third grade, I need Ghostbusters money. So this continued for a while, and then I got into gifted classes. I ended up going to the University of Kentucky when I was 14, studied desynchronization of gonadotropins and how they affect the estrous cycle. And while I was there, a grad student came in and said, "Oh, did you know that you have Asperger's?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" So, long story short, I ended up working in the autism lab, and the guy in the autism lab was the guy who followed me around. Turns out he wrote a whole bunch of papers, and it turns out that I, to this day, my mother never acknowledges that the results of that psychological testing that I did in third grade. But evidence would state that since a famous studier of gifted autistic kids who wrote a lot of papers about gifted autistic kids followed me around, it stood to reason that I was identified fairly early. But I worked with autistic kids in the autism lab. I sort of made my career around it. I started working with autistic kids in the school system. Uh, I came out as quote Aspie back in the day, because back when we used Asperger's, before we knew how horrible he was. But my clinical supervisor called me the R word, because she says that I couldn't be Aspie because that would be the R word. So I said, "Oh, I'll never tell anyone ever again." So I worked through community mental health, and after all this stuff, I was qualified to do testing, and I got frustrated with the way that testing was done, and I decided I wanted to start my own business. And the place that I was working at said, "No, you can't start your own business, or we'll fire you." And I was like, "Is that really a threat? So if you fire me, will I get unemployment?" And they said, "Probably." And I was like, "And I'll be able to, start on my own business while you pay me to start my own business?" And they said, "It sounds likely." And I was like, "You should work on your threats, sir." And so I ended up starting my own business. And I used to take insurance. I used to take a lot of insurance, and most of my people were on Medicaid, until our Medicaid provider in Kentucky changed, and it went from Passport to Beacon. And then that was a nightmare. And then one of the main insurance providers told me that adults could not be autistic. So they didn't pay me for 6 months, and I nearly lost my house. So I've been self-pay ever since. But I also do a lot of community work, because I recognize that self-pay is not realistic for a lot of people. So I do stuff like the podcast. When Angela said, "Hey, you want to do a podcast?" I was like, "Yes, let's do a podcast." So I do what I can to help people where they're at, because there's a lot of people in the world who don't have this kind of information, and they need it to live their own best life, or to help their kids live their best lives. So yeah, so that leads us to here, where we are talking at this very moment.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, I wouldn't call that a weird story, but it was interesting though.
Oh, thank you.
So how did you two meet?
I am a stalker. I heard Matt on a podcast, and Matt wrote a story that you should ask him about it. The story completely changed my life. I heard him on a podcast share this story, and I was like, I have to meet this guy. And he had a professional consultation, and I signed up for it, and I paid my monies, and we had an amazing session. And in the last couple seconds of it, I was like, "Okay, one more quick question. You want to do a podcast?" So I had been working on a podcast, but our conversation was so fun that I was like, I had this idea to do guest hosts. So I was going to do a different guest host every 6 weeks. I was going to rotate, because I know how much work it is to do a podcast. I know Alex. And so I'm like, it's too much to ask somebody else to do a whole podcast, but I could ask someone to do six episodes. But I don't know. I felt really different. Once Matt and I talked, I was like, I think we could make some magic together.
And that was like 70 episodes ago.
It was a lot of 74 episodes.
74 episodes. Yeah, that's a lot of episodes.
That's right. I was just surprised that you admitted you were a stalker. I mean, that was so do you feel let me see what should we go with now? Let's see. So I see you published over 1,500 bestsellers.
That's a lot of bestsellers.
Mm-hmm.
Not a dud in the bunch.
That is definitely a lot.
Well, or I know how to hack an algorithm because I understand systems. So it's really the term bestsellers, like it kind of annoys me. I have a whole chapter in a book, which is like bestsellers are BS, which is funny because it's what I do for a living.
Did it sell well?
So here's the thing. Most bestsellers, like New York Times bestseller is slightly different. I'll tell you the differences, but most of them are basically hacked. It's not exactly hacked, but there's a formula. Everybody in the industry knows exactly how many books we have to sell. We pre-sell them.
Got you.
So the number for New York Times is 35,000, roughly. It's a little more in the in certain seasons, a little less in the summer, but 35,000 is your rough number. And so we know we need to sell 35,000 books. So what we do is we know that to get someone to buy a book, we can run ads. And usually the cost to sell a book, like to get someone to buy it, it costs you roughly $70. So if the book is $20, I'm going to pay $70 to get you to buy it. So I need $70 times 35,000. And
that's a lot of money.
Right. And it's a lot of money. And so when you see, there's a trick with the New York Times bestsellers, which is there's also an editorial review board. So you have to hit that number and they have to like you. And there are certain things they don't like particularly pseudoscience, COVID deniers. Like you could be Alex Jones and sell 35,000 books and they're not going to put you on the New York Times bestseller list.
That's
so
good.
Things like that.
I like that.
Yeah. Appreciate that. So basically you figure out what list you want to get on. You figure out how many books you have to sell. Then you figure out how to buy the ads. And then you buy the ads ahead of time so that you're getting pre-orders. If you've ever been harassed to pre-order a book, it's because they're doing a campaign like this.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
It means there's not a dud in the bunch. It means I know how to pick books and sell ads.
Yeah. So I don't know. My math ain't the best in the world, but just doing it in my head, 35,000 times 7, that's like what, 2.1 million or something?
It's a lot of money. It's usually 250,000 is usually what people's budget is. Yeah. But the trick is there are some ways you can recoup some of the costs. And then when you get certain bestseller statuses, it can change how much money you make as a speaker. So we have all different campaigns. So I gave you like a New York Times campaign, but we have Amazon campaigns. We have Wall Street Journal campaigns. So they're all a little different. But the thing I think I would want to share with your listeners is it really is all BS and it will not bring you joy and fulfillment and happiness. It's just a game and it doesn't really, none of it matters. What matters is you doing work that's important to you and fulfilling to you. And so many people come to me and say, I want to be at a bestseller list. And I'm like, here's how much it'll cost. Let's pick one. Yeah. It's like saying I want a hamburger. Like you can have one. You can have a $5 hamburger. You can have a $20 hamburger. It's not the thing you think it is. What they're really saying is like, I want to have a huge impact like Malcolm Gladwell. And that is something you can't buy or hack. That is something that has to do with creating from a place of flow, being truly unique, being in your zone of genius, being like really passionate about the work you do, and then a whole lot of luck.
I
Gotcha.
just want to buy a jacket with one really large pocket that can hold one copy of the book. And then if anybody brings it up in any possible tangential way, I can say, I wrote a book too.
Yeah.
And they will be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Around the clock promotion.
Yeah, exactly. Clap, clap, clap.
So really the bestseller thing is really more so more like a badge, like just something to kind of show off, say, hey, I'm a bestseller. And if you get put on different lists and things that may, if you have different people that's looking for certain books and they see your book on the bestseller, they may go read it. So now you may gain new potential purchases on your book because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it does. It is. It's beneficial, right? So, like, then you spend a lot of money, and people hear about it, and then if the book's good, they like it, and then there's word of mouth, and then you sell more copies. So there are benefits, but also it's just a game. Yeah. This is true. Well, let me tell you a little story. When I think it was 1994. I was in college. My boyfriend and I went to Times Square. So I grew up in Connecticut. So did my college boyfriend. Grew up in Connecticut, went to college in DC. We went to New York City, Times Square for New Year's Eve. Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. And we were standing there all day waiting for the ball to drop. And this girl comes over to us and hands us these 2 signs that say, Kansas loves you, Dick. And Dick was the host, like Ryan Seacrest. It was Dick Clark. Kansas loves you. We are not from Kansas. However, at midnight on 93 to 94, we were holding up the Kansas loves you signs and we kissed right at midnight. And there was a close-up on us right at midnight. They planned the shot. It's not like they're randomly throwing cameras around. They plan the shot at 8 p.m. So I think there's so much we look at when we hear someone says they're a bestseller or they have our podcast is in the top 1%. Our podcast is in the top 1%.
Oh, we made it.
Super, super excited. I know, I think we're 1.5%.
Yeah, we were too, but that's creeping up there.
Which is awesome. But what that actually tells you, I mean, we have a great podcast, don't get me wrong. But what that's also actually telling you is a lot of people start podcasts and abandon them. They have one episode. We're better than that one. Yes.
Climbing the mountain.
I think I don't know. I feel exhausted by the way we have taken to measuring everything. I think it's like part of capitalism. It's like, let's measure and look, you got to write a bio. I wrote a bio that said we have 1,500 bestsellers, and we do have 1,500 bestsellers, but it's like, sometimes I think we quantify everything and a lot of it's just BS. Just like do something awesome and be a good person and be nice to your friends. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, then everything else will follow. It'll if you do good work like you were saying before, and really try to make a difference, then everything else will follow. It doesn't have to necessarily say, hey, I sold 1 million copies of this or I did this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to Matt. So what really, I mean, is there a certain thing that really drew you to specialize in working with autistic and neurodivergent communities?
I love the autistic community. It's where I feel at home. I lived the life and tried to walk the walk of standing up straight and putting on a voice and masking and saying, yes, I care about weather and small talk. And it killed me. I mean, it almost literally killed me. It's exhausting to try to, do that nonsense day in and day out. And I really, really genuinely love talking with autistic people about things that autistic people love. I love autistic people's accents. Neurotypical people call it monotone, disjointed, pedantic speech with tangential conversation and difficulty modulating breathing as we speak. And I love the flow of autistic voice. I just think it's musical. and this is where I feel at home. And there's so much to learn about autistic heritage and autistic culture, and the variations and intersectionality, and where the cultural origins of autistic people in every culture on earth, because it's genetic. I'm autistic. I have an autistic kid. He will probably have autistic kids. My mom's side of the family is all autistic, but autistic people appear all over the world, and it's fascinating to see how autistic people are the same despite growing up in drastically different regions. And it's just really really neat to, like, one time I had somebody from mainland China decide they wanted to have an evaluation with me, and came into my office, and it was fantastic because I had so many questions about, like, their upbringing and their life and all this other stuff. But there were also so many similarities of, like, boy, noise, am I right? I know, I hate so much noise. And even having, like, an accent from speaking Mandarin, he also had an autistic accent on top of that, and it's really cool. And I just love that.
Hmm. That's definitely an interesting way to put it. I mean, you can tell when someone talks about something that they're passionate about, and that's one thing I definitely see, when you speak about it. Um, so I'm just gonna jump back and forth, I guess, between you guys. So Angela, can you share maybe like a success story of maybe an author whose book made a significant impact?
Yeah, well, I'd love to talk about one of our newest authors, Lowry Hector. Her book, Always Bring Your Sunglasses, came out a couple weeks ago. It's had a hugely successful launch, and it is a book about her journey growing up autistic in New York City, the sensory issues that she had to deal with from loud noise and school and clothing and food challenges, and going back and forth between two different parents' houses and public transportation. And she kind of shares what would have been different if she knew she was autistic then, what accommodations could have been made, how she's made those accommodations now in her life, and then gives a kind of guide for parents of the ways they can adjust their environment to have a more regulated kid and a more regulated household. So I love that book. We've had so much incredible feedback. I think there are like 30 reviews that are already up there. And if you want to check it out and read more about it, you can go to alwaysbringyoursunglasses.com. And it's up on Amazon and everywhere else.
Okay. I like the title as well. So that's pretty interesting. So how many books have you written? I guess that would be the proper English.
Well, I have a two-part answer to that one. I have ghost written 56 books.
Damn.
But books that have my name on them, and you can see my most recent book right here. I have 8 or 9, starting to lose track. I try and do one a year. So I think that might be my 9th. But that book is about how artificial intelligence can be used for neurodivergent people as an accessibility tool to make publishing and writing a book and marketing a book more accessible to people who have traditionally been shut out. So it's not about using AI to write your book, but more like to structure it, to pick a book topic, to do marketing plans, to break down process complexity. I say in the book, like, in a perfect world, you could pay me, it's like $25,000 to work with me for a year. That is out of a lot of people's budgets. And so I give the exact formula that you can use to replicate me, to use AI to replicate the stuff I do with my clients, and it's totally free.
Right. So why if I can talk today. So what made you choose that name, the Equalizing Quill?
Well, this story, I start this book talking about the Industrial Revolution and the Luddites. And what actually happened in the Industrial Revolution is there were these artisans. And if you think of artisans like most people who have access to publishing now, which tends to be overall wealthy white people, is who gets access to publish. That's not saying no poor people or Black people have ever published a book. Obviously they have. Queer people have published, autistic people have published. But when you look at what the advances are, there's a hashtag on Twitter, publishing paid me. You'll see rich white people get about 10x the advance of poor Black people. So that makes it much harder. If you're getting a $500,000 advance, it's easy to not have to work another job. You could spend all day writing a book, right? But if you're getting a $5,000 advance, you're going to have another job. So then it's harder to write a good book. So anyway, that is exactly a parallel to what happened in the Industrial Revolution. And so there were all these artisans and they had established their place. And now these like low-end workers suddenly could get regular work, union jobs, without having 20 years as a journeyman learning a trade. And so there was a rise of the middle class. There was more accessibility to the middle class, and it had an equalizing factor. It's how we created the middle class. And now what's happened is the middle class has separated. There's more of a split between the rich and the poor than there ever has been before. And I think what's going to happen with AI, and I cite a lot of really powerful studies that are being done on this exact thing, is AI, if you're actually rich and smart, and you like went to college and you've got PhDs and various degrees, AI doesn't really help you that much. But if you are somebody who has less access to education, less access to English language, it makes a huge difference. So they did a study at a law firm, and lawyers were told to use AI to write their motions, and it took them longer. But when they had customer service in their like IT department use AI, they were able to close cases faster. So if you were making like $20,000 or $30,000 a year, you were much more likely to have job security and get a raise because of AI. If you're a lawyer, it didn't really help you. So what we're going to see is paralegals are going to take on a lot of lawyers' jobs. So there'll be fewer lawyers making $500,000 a year and more paralegals. So those $20,000 employees are going to become $80,000 employees and take over a lot of the work from the lawyers. There'll be like one lawyer who always oversees things. Same thing with doctors. And in publishing, the way it's going to impact us is the people with the knowledge who have been shut out of publishing have a chance now to equalize the game. So I think AI is the pen or the quill that will equalize things in the publishing industry.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So before I forget, earlier you said that there was a story that Matt told on the podcast that made you start stalking him.
Yeah, you should ask Matt about that.
Yeah. So I want him to tell that story now. If you get a second, Matt.
So again, because autism is not a disease, it is not a, I mean, it's not a disorder. It is a disability, because again, we live in a world that is not made for us at all, and it because of process complexity, because we process so much information, because we're very detail oriented. The world is not made for us, so it can make it hard for us to function in this particular world. But it is hereditary. It is a way of our people, and it is something that we pass down from parent to child. And because of that, we do things in a different way. Like with my son, I teach him to love all the neat stuff that's around me. I teach him the stories, like, Charles Schultz was autistic. So, we watch and read Peanuts. George Lucas is autistic. We watch a lot of Star Wars. Jim Henson and Frank Oz autistic. We watching Muppets. So we listen to the stories of our people. We listen to the songs of our people, and I thought that we needed an origin story for our people, like the myths of old. And I created the legend of Autistica, of how the autistic people came to be. So that's another project that we're working on, because we've got a bunch of Autistica books ready to go. We just need an artist to who can draw dragons fairly well, and because dragons are cool. So that's a thing that I would like, because I wrote a bunch of stories for my son, and we have them on the podcast. Episode 25 is an updated version. Episode 25 of the Autistic Culture podcast is an updated version of the Legend of Autistica, and I really hope that it resonates with people, and it talks about why we are who we are, and why we the origin of our people worldwide.
Okay. And I'll make sure I pin that particular episode in the description, so that way people can go and check it out.
Cool.
I know for sure I definitely want to go check it out myself as well. So
thank you.
So let's see what we got. So Matt, how do you approach psychological evaluations in a way that is maybe like sensitive and inclusion to neurodivergent individuals?
Oh, that is a whole thing. I am getting ready to. I actually have to. I got. I'm doing a thing with Meg Proctor about how to find autism and stuff, and I did a presentation, submitted it to her, and she sent me an email of, yes, let's talk, and that is not a phrase that autistic people like to hear. So I have not yet responded to her about that, but in theory, I've got a presentation ready to go about how I essentially do things relatively backwards. I also recently did a consult. They haven't paid me yet, which is ironic, because did a consult with the people at Vanderbilt who have Department of Defense money, and they have not yet paid me. But they wanted to know about why my way is different, and my way is positive, because so many people throw like 19 hours of testing at clients, throwing everything at the ball, like aptitude tests, school tests, IQ tests. One place in Louisville even gives the Wisconsin card sorting task, which is a dementia test, because people who are not autistic know that we're weird and different, but they don't really understand how or why. And because I'm autistic, I understand all this stuff from the inside out. I can look at the diagnostic definitions in the DSM and reframe it to be human. I can do like one of the biggest autism tests out there is the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, second edition, the ADOS-2. And it's got a bunch of good stuff in it. For instance, it has a whole bunch of everyday objects that you give to people and see how they respond to it. And like my ADOS kit came with 3 Batman action figures, like straight off the shelf Batman action figures, right? And it came with Mr. Freeze, Azrael, 2 Batman action figures, and Dana Scully. And in theory, you're supposed to give these action figures to people and see how they play with it and say, hello, I am, because they're probably not fans, and they'll say, hi, I am a king, I am a queen, blah, 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 do all this other stuff. But autistic people will take the action figures and like look at them and examine the detail. And the ADOS, as it is written, says that is unusual because they don't know how to play. But for us, being an autistic person who did the ADOS training, it's because we're looking at the detail and looking at the sculpt and the articulation and the paint jobs. And again, if they don't make sounds or don't say hello, blah, and make them talk, that's supposed to be like a negative about their imagination. But one of the kids I evaluated stated it really well when I said, oh yeah, I noticed that you're not talking. He said, well, I'm the only one playing. I don't need to make the noises out loud. And I was like, there you go, because I can make much better Godzilla noises inside my head than I can make them with my mouth.
Yeah.
And so taking that similar approach to like all of the questions about like fidgeting, because I'm spending this entire time rocking back and forth and moving around because my body needs to move. That's just how it works. It's proprioceptive sensitivities. Talking about stuff that neurotypical people don't know about, like our interoceptive difficulties, like forgetting to eat, forgetting to sleep, forgetting to go to the bathroom, forgetting to stop eating if you really, really like the food that you're eating. Uh, Stuff like the process complexity, how so the biggest thing about autism is that the genetic difference about autistic people is that we are immune to a protein called MTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. And most people have this protein, and when they have this protein, they dissolve their brain, right? So most people from the ages of 12 to 26 go through a process of autophage, which literally means eat itself, which leads to synaptic pruning. So most people that we call neurotypical dissolve half of their connections, never to get them back. Autistic people don't do that. We grow our connections all throughout our life. We have longer and more dendrites. We have way more synapses. All these connections connecting to each other. We process 42% more information at rest than neurotypical people. We don't have a sensory filter, and because of all that, we experience the world as intense and chaotic, and we are very detail oriented. And again, this is something that shows up in every autistic person across the globe. So it's this big universal thing. So instead of seeing it as like lack of eye contact, which is a very white colonialist structure, because again, Europeans love eye contact, no other culture does. It's insane. The Europeans taught dogs to do it, but no other animal makes eye contact. If you look at a macaque or a baboon, they're going to rip your face off. That's just not how that works. Most cultures get offended if you like stare them in the eyeballs, but you know it's a white thing. So that is definitely should not be a criteria for autism. But the bottom up processing, where we're incredibly detail oriented, where we're so detail oriented, we get into a what they call a monotropic state, a state of flow, where we are so into like this Megazord. I was building this Megazord for maybe 3 or 4 hours because man, I love me a good Megazord. And I did it on a weekend when my son wasn't here, and it was fun. And I just dove right in, and it recharged me. It was great. Neurotypical people don't really do that. So coming at this from a very positive thing of saying this is the way of our people, that if you can dive in and enjoy the intricate complexities of the universe, but you get so involved with the intricate complexities of the universe, you forget to eat, forget to bathe, get so overwhelmed that sometimes a lot of us don't like driving. I hate driving. I love telehealth and I love doing, therapy from home because I don't have to get out in traffic and deal with all the people on the road. I hate that. I hate putting on shoes. I don't like it. I'm barefoot right now. I've got cotton shorts. It's extremely comfy. I just chill in whatever works best. I will never again wear a tie, man. I swear to that. Black t-shirts all the way forever. I think that you know what I'm talking about because we are t-shirt buddies. So this is the way. So when I see people who have these sort of similarities and have these intense interests and you know, have an absolute amount of information on some arcane topic, I found one of us, and it gives me joy. And I like to say that instead of, I mean, it is, I mean, legally speaking, because of my degree, because of my experience, it is legally a diagnosis. But more than that, it's an identification and an ot mitzvah because I'm able to say, congratulations, you're autistic, instead of, oh my, you will never, ever, ever be normal. Woe is you. Because that sucks, man. I want us to be proud of who we are. I want people, I want autistic people across the world to look at us and look at themselves and be proud to be one of us and proud of all the cool stuff that our people have accomplished, and to share that with the world so that and that's another thing because when we talk about autistic culture on the podcast, I would love people of all neurotypes to join us in eating our dino chicken nuggets, to join us in wearing clothes that aren't itchy, to join us in not dealing with a whole bunch of extraneous noise or extraneous chaos or, this kind of thing, because I think that everybody would have a happier and healthier world if we didn't have to deal with all the chaos. But so yeah, that's my approach to evaluation.
Or at the very least can get something
Yeah.
out of appreciating it. Like
Yeah.
I've been to big loud families that are like, everyone's talking at once over each other. I've been to super quiet families, but I've like learned something and taken something out of it, not thinking like, oh, you should have a loud family or oh, you should have a quiet family. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's interesting about autism as a culture is what most people think about autism is that's such a terrible tragedy and we should fix it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh, let's see what this is all about. Because if you take us out of the mix, you don't get hip hop, you don't get stone bridges or stone tools, you don't get iron bridges, you don't get calculus. Like there's a lot you might not be, you might want to think twice before you get rid of us by giving us your little special pill.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you really can argue that, some of the smartest people in the world, most influential people in the world are autistic, because I mean, going back to what you were saying about, the action figures like the Batman. So it's to me, I can't say that I've ever been diagnosed with autism, but some of the things that you were saying kind of resonated with me because I kind of when I see something, I kind of like dissect it first so even before I talk, before I have conversations with people, I process a lot.
Yeah.
Before I just say anything, I don't just say the first thing that comes to my mind. I always process, I always think first before I act, before I respond, or anything like that. Which, I mean, has helped me become, to everybody that's around me. Everybody wants to be like me. I'm the one everybody goes to. Everybody on their wheel and on their insurance, they have me on there because they know I'm going to make the best decision. So to me, processing is a great thing to have, to be able to do that extra processing because, if we had more people that done more processing, we'll probably have less, killings and things like that, especially in the black culture. We know we see that a lot as well. So to me, I mean, that's a great thing to be able to, do the extra process and make sure you actually think before you respond or react to things.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We need that to be a positive. We need that to be advertised. We need that to be a strength that people look at and, say, I want to be with that guy because he thinks ahead. I want that guy because he knows that I know that things will go right because he plans out X, Y, and Z ahead of time. This is great. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I want to ask my dad about that because, when I remember him talking about it before, when I was younger, growing up, I didn't start. It's like I knew how to talk, but I really didn't just start like conversating with people until I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it was just because like, and I'm the same way now. It's like, ironically, I'm not a talker, even though I do host a podcast. I'm not really a talker. So, like if I'm sitting in the room, like for example, me and my dad will go up the road, maybe like an hour drive, and I'll sit in the car with him the whole time, and I might not say 2 words to him. That's my dad, and I love him, but when my mind is at peace, I don't talk. I just kind of I'm just there, and that don't mean I don't love him or anything like that. That's just me. I'm a quiet person. I like my peace, and I've always been like that. So.
You're taking in the details. You're busy thinking, and that's the neat thing because we as a culture don't need to fill the void with meaningless chatter. We can just sit and enjoy each other's company in silence. That's a valid way of socializing.
Yeah, I agree, and that's always been me. So I mean, hey, I'd be proud to be called autistic
This is the way.
Hey, that lets me know, hey, I'm smarter than a lot of you people. And, hey, that's a proud thing though. So let's see. I got a couple more questions before we kind of get out of here. So, quick question. Okay, TikTok. What inspired you to start sharing your knowledge and experiences on platforms like TikTok, Matt?
Okay. So back during the lockdown, right? There was a pandemic loophole. So uh, there was an exception made because in the event that someone was traveling and they were trapped in another state, they should be allowed to have exactly one session out of state with a therapist, right? So, thanks to that loophole, which is like lasted like 18 months, I was able to have exactly one session with anybody in the US. And I got to do evals with everybody all over the place. And they got on TikTok and they started talking about all kinds of neat stuff and started tagging me. And one of the things that led to my friendship with Aaron, that led to Meg, that led to Angela, is that I came up with a new way of looking at autism with this spectrum graphic of a wheel that has all the different autistic traits, instead of like being a line. And that's all nonsense. And that is shared a lot on TikTok, and people talk about it, and people mention me a lot. And I do have a TikTok technically, but I have absolutely no idea how to use it. So I am tagged a lot. I am mentioned a lot. People talk about me and talk about things that I've said, and I have never actually made a TikTok, but I am TikTok popular, low key popular. So it's an interesting life.
Yeah, I mean that was going to be my next question. Actually, was as someone who goes viral on TikTok a lot, what has that experience been like, and what kind of impact have you seen from it?
It's been interesting. People will say, "Are you the autism guy from TikTok?" And I will say, "Maybe." And it's like, "Oh, neat! People know who I am. That's awesome." Thanks to that, and then of course thanks to the podcast, people know me way better than I know literally anybody else, because I stay in my house all the time, and I live in the dark like Gollum. But yeah, I did, every once in a while I will meet people online, and they'll say, "Oh my God, it's you! Your background looks just like your background," and I'll be like, "Oh, good, it hasn't changed because I've changed."
It's mine.
Yay! So I'm really really glad that people are enthusiastic. It's it's always surprising, because I mean, like again, it's one of those things where I don't know. I see myself as the guy who lives in the cave with all the lightsabers. It's kind of neat for people to like that. So I appreciate it. I don't know how to respond to it, and I can't take a compliment if you hand it to me in a bucket. But I very much appreciate the enthusiasm, and I very much appreciate the people who like the things that I say and do.
Yep.
I'll tell you my favorite story about Matt's virality is recently there were a group of people talking about how they wished Matt was their dad. Matt's everyone's autism dad. It was very cute.
Okay, yeah.
That was very heartwarming.
That was a very sweet thread.
So actually, speaking of that, I was going to go to a question for Angela, but since you said that, so Matt, how do you, so how are you able to, hold on, I had the question right here. Sorry, I had it right here somewhere. Oh yeah, okay. So how do you balance like being a dedicated dad and your professional work and your advocacy efforts?
I more or less combine them all into one, because the reason, so I stayed in the neuro closet for years. Again, with my clinical supervisor saying that being autistic is the R word, I'm like, yeah, I'll just not come out. And then when my son was born, and then it became pretty obvious that he was exactly like me. He was my little clone, still is. And I realized that I had to come out of the closet, and I had to fight the good fight so that he won't have to. So I am an advocate because I want to make the world a better place for him. I want him to be safe when he grows up. I want him to be happy when he grows up. And my work is tied to my advocacy, because my advocacy is a big. I created a new model for autistic therapy, because therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, largely doesn't work for autistic people because, again, all the differences we talked about. So I created autistic centered therapy, and a lot of autistic centered therapy is advocacy work. So when I do therapy, I teach people how to advocate for their own needs, advocate for healthy boundaries, advocate for our community, and again, to make the world a better place for us and for him. And again, right now, he's chilling with the family, watching Muppets while we're talking, and we'll go out and we'll play and look at electric towers. And we ordered some chicken nuggets earlier so that he could have some chicken nuggets for supper. And my life, when I part of my life is based solely on working. When he's at my house, my life is based around him. When he's at his mother's house, my life is based around autistic people and making the world a better place that is hopefully more more affirming and more embracing of diversity.
Gotcha.
Because again, I don't believe that any one brain is the absolute best, but I believe that we need to appreciate the differences.
Yes, I definitely would agree with that. So Angela, can you share any exciting projects or initiatives that you have in the works at Difference Press?
Yeah, well, I'll share an exciting thing we have at the works at the Autistic Culture Podcast. We are launching season 3 in the fall. So right now we are doing all of our planning to launch our 3rd season of the podcast. We are going to twice weekly instead of once weekly for season 3, which is very exciting. And I just told Matt this, but I recently commissioned an autistic musician to create a theme song for our show, but really a national anthem for Autistica, our imaginary country, where our culture comes from, and working on some really fun things for the community that has sprung up around our podcast. So we love welcoming people into our community. Matt and I do Ask Us Anything nights where we have live conversations with our community members, and we're going to be amping that up for season 3. We're taking a couple months off and doing a whole bunch of planning for next year, and it's going to be, I think, our best season yet. So,
okay, hey, I like to hear it. Like I said, I want everybody that's tuning in on this episode to make sure they go and subscribe to you guys' podcast on YouTube or Apple Podcasts. So it's on all platforms, right?
Spotify, it is on all platforms. Yep. The Autistic Culture Podcast.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure I put links to that and links to you all's social media as well in the description. So
nice.
Tune in. So a few more before we get up out of here. Let's do this.
And my time is getting a little tight, so maybe.
Okay.
Sorry to do that. I'm just.
No worries. Well, actually, we'll end it up with this one right here. So, what do you both? This question is for you both. What do you both feel is the most rewarding aspect of hosting the podcast together?
I kind of like it when people say that they wish I was their dad. That's neat.
Oh,
yeah.
That was unexpected, and man, that hit me right here. So I'm like, thank you.
Every episode we feature a different aspect of autistic culture, and to prepare for the episodes, Matt and I will watch lots and lots of TV shows and read books and read websites and go into a little data research rabbit hole. Usually when we're recording an episode the way we have been doing it, there's like 2 weeks between. So we kind of know what our episode is going to be. And then there's 2 weeks where you're researching this thing that's not necessarily my special interest, but it's my special interest for those 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's really, really fun to do all the research, collect the information, and then sort it into how does this fit into what makes this autistic culture. So
Yeah.
we've created these 10 pillars of what autistic culture actually is. And then I'm looking at all this data and all these movies and memoirs and newspaper articles, and I'm like, what's this? What's this part of our culture? And I would say just having a reason to do the research. I mean, I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I wrote term papers for a living. So that's my favorite thing about being a ghostwriter. When I'm writing a book, it's like, it's not my special interest, but I get to try it on for 3 weeks and do all the research as if it was. So.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So we'll wrap it up there, even though I feel like this conversation probably could have went on for about 4 hours. But we're gonna wrap it up there. I definitely appreciate you both for taking the time out to come on and to let us, enter into your world per se. And like I said, I hope everybody that's tuned in definitely goes and checks out you guys' podcast, buys you guys books, and then as far as whenever Matt releases his, just let me know on that as well. I'll try to support you guys also.
Yeah, if you subscribe to Autistic Culture Podcast, we'll definitely announce it when our next books come out, both of ours. So
okay, perfect. So I won't hold you guys any longer. I thank you guys once again. Everyone, you guys just watched another episode of All in All with Alex podcast. See you on the next episode.
Have a good one.